Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Politics Simplified YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 2026 primary in New York City, or in the state of New York, specifically in 3 congressional races in the New York City area, where New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's endorsed candidates swept 3 congressional primaries, 1 open primary, and 2 where Mayor Mamdani's endorsed candidates, unseated and successfully primaried 2 Democratic incumbents. So the districts we're going to be talking about today are District 7. Perfect one to start off with because this is the open primary. So incumbent U.S. Representative Nydia Velázquez was retiring and had endorsed Antonio Reynoso, who's the Brooklyn Borough president, to replace her in Congress. Reynoso was seen more as an establishment figure. Zohran Mamdani, mayor of New York City, endorsed Claire Valdez, who is the state assembly member from the 37th district. And as with any kind of open primary in a major city Democratic area, any kind of open Democratic primary in a major city, you're going to see a lot of candidates run. We saw this in Illinois. We're going to see this in California, where when you have, a heavily Democratic district and it's an open primary, you're going to see a lot of candidates run. And that was the case in this district. There were 5 candidates, which is not a lot, but it's still, where generally you don't see a candidate win with above 50% of the vote. But in this case, Claire Valdez won with 56% of the vote. So a pretty decisive victory there. And if you look at the precinct map, very decisive. And, pretty much, obviously, the race was pretty much between her and Reynoso. But a pretty decisive victory here. And now where it starts to get more interesting and just shows the political clout that Zohran Mamdani has and how he successfully elevated these progressive candidates to win their races, especially against incumbents. We have to look at District 10, in which Brad Lander, the former controller of New York City, it's a finance-related position, similar to being an elected treasurer. It's spelled comptroller, but pronounced controller. He had endorsed Zohran Mamdani in the 2025 mayoral election. Keep in mind, there's ranked choice voting. So him, Brad Lander, and Mamdani had endorsed each other in the 2025 mayoral election. And Brad Lander primaried incumbent Representative Dan Goldman, who I believe 2 years prior had won an open seat, or 4 years prior. We're going to look at, he had won an open seat in 2022. So then in 2026, Brad Lander primaries him and wins with, once again, Dan Goldman is seen more as an establishment Democrat, whereas Brad Lander is seen to be more on the progressive side of the party. And if you look at the results of this race, Brad Lander won 65-35. So, I mean, when you just talk about the political clout that Zohran Mamdani has developed in the city of New York during his first year as mayor, it's very politically impressive to see these kind of results where, Brad Lander won by 30 points against an incumbent congressperson. And that's not unheard of, but it's rare to see, this kind of energy for these candidates. And then the last race I want to talk about is in District 13, where Darializa Avila Chevalier, if I'm mispronouncing that name, I apologize, unseated, or I guess denominated, defeated in the primary, successfully primaried Adriano Espaillat, the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And, this is a high-ranking Democratic House member This is somewhat very reminiscent of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's successful primary challenge against Joe Crowley in 2018, where, once again, Joe Crowley, very high-ranking House Democrat who was primaried by this young, progressive politician, successfully primaried. And this was probably the biggest surprise of New York's primary. Once again, she was endorsed by Zohran Mamdani, and she won, albeit by 3.5 percentage points. This was the closest of those three races that we're going to focus on. But once again, this is just once again remarkable how much political influence Zohran Mamdani has developed during his first year as mayor of New York City. To, endorse primary challengers is one thing. To essentially run the table and have all of your endorsed primary challengers win their races is very politically impressive. Where almost like what we've been seeing throughout primaries on the Republican side throughout the 2026 cycle is that Trump-endorsed candidates are still winning, particularly against incumbents. You saw it in Texas. Trump-endorsed Ken Paxton defeated incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn in the Republican primary. You saw it in Louisiana. Julia Letlow, Trump-endorsed candidate, defeated Bill Cassidy, incumbent U.S. Senator. So, what we're seeing is almost on the Democratic side, something similar where, particularly in, New York, and that's the area that Zohran Mamdani has said he's focused on, is endorsing candidates in New York and New York City, where, we've seen 3 Democratic candidates, 2 of them successfully primary incumbents, and one of them decisively win an open primary. Just really speaks to the influence that Zohran Mamdani has over the Democratic electorate in New York City. And I mean, we could say we saw that last year during the Democratic primary. He won a pretty decisive victory during the Democratic primary. But what we've seen here is a political feat that's even more impressive than that in, unseating 2 Democratic incumbents. And it's rare for an elected official as prominent as, the mayor of New York City, for example, to endorse a primary challenger to a high-ranking House member of their own party. But once again, it's very interesting, and it is quite the political feat, and it's something I thought I wanted to make a video about, just because on this channel we talk about stuff like this, where it's like, interesting electoral outcomes like this. And I thought this was something that was interesting and something I wanted to talk about. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm going to make a video about the Colorado primary as well, because that was somewhat similar. The other thing I did want to cover in this is that I think what we're seeing this year throughout primaries on both sides of the aisle is almost an anti-incumbent electorate, similar to 2010 when you had the Tea Party on the Republican side. What you saw was just this anti-incumbent sentiment, and I think that's what we're seeing in 2026 as well. I'm going to make a video on the Colorado primary as well, because that was somewhat similar to this, although not as much, but definitely somewhat of a similar electoral outcome. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you're enjoying these more specific videos, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thank you for watching the video. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Please share it with a few of your friends as well. And remember to turn on the notifications so that way you can get notified whenever I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope you all have a great day.